Before the story begins, take a second to support the channel. If you enjoy deep space mysteries, ancient horrors, and humanity punching far above its weight, tap like, subscribe for more HFY sci-fi, and drop a comment telling us what you think is buried beneath forgotten worlds. Your theories might be closer to the truth than you expect. Dr. Elias Cade had been warned 17 times not to land on Keros 9, and he ignored every warning with the quiet stubbornness that defined most human breakthroughs. The planet hung beneath his shuttle like a fossilized eye, cloudless, lifeless, and officially classified as a sealed grave under Galactic Council decree. To Elias, that alone made it irresistible. A world declared off-limits by species that barely tolerated curiosity was usually a world hiding something worth knowing. Elias was not a soldier, not a diplomat, and certainly not important in the way the galaxy measured importance. He was an archaeologist, human, male, mid-30s, with more enthusiasm than caution and more faith in the past than the present. His hands shook slightly as he guided the shuttle down, not from fear, but from the familiar thrill of standing at the edge of forgotten history. The council called humans unpredictable. Elias preferred the word persistent. The ruins emerged from the dust like the bones of a dead god. Towers half sunken into black stone stretched toward the sky at impossible angles, their surfaces etched with symbols no living species officially recognized. Elias stepped out alone, his boots echoing too loudly in the thin air, his suit's sensors flickering as if confused by the place itself. The silence was complete, heavy, as though the planet was holding its breath. He began recording immediately, narrating out of habit, out of a need to leave proof that someone had stood here with wonder instead of weapons. The architecture was defensive but not aggressive, built to endure rather than dominate. That detail lodged in his mind. Civilizations that planned to last rarely trusted violence alone. Deep within the largest structure, Elias found the chamber. It was sealed by a slab of dark alloy fused seamlessly into the surrounding stone, untouched by erosion, untouched by time. Symbols ringed its surface, layered and overlapping, written in multiple extinct languages. Elias translated what he could, his breath fogging the inside of his visor as excitement edged into unease. Guardian. Sleeper. Last mercy. The words repeated in variations, as if every culture that encountered this door had felt compelled to warn the next. Far above the planet, a different kind of interest sparked. Galactic Council surveillance flagged Elias's dig not as a threat, but as a complication. Humans had an inconvenient habit of touching things better left untouched, and this site was classified under the highest level of quarantine. Not because of what was known but because of what was suspected. The Council did not debate long. They rarely did when humans were involved. A quiet contract was issued through deniable channels, routed to a mercenary guild with no political ties and a reputation for clean solutions. Eliminate the archaeologist. Collapse the site. No survivors necessary. Elias, unaware of the decision written across light years, knelt before the sealed door and made the most human choice possible. Instead of forcing it open, he studied it. Instead of calling for extraction, he traced the symbols with careful fingers, adjusting his tools to mimic the frequencies embedded in the stone. He spoke softly as he worked, not to the recorder, but to the builders who had been dust for longer than humanity had known fire. Something answered. The slab did not open. Sank. A low vibration rippled through the chamber, through the ruins, through the planet's crust itself. Elias stumbled back as ancient mechanisms stirred, power flowing through conduits that had waited in perfect patience for millennia. Sensors screamed warnings his suit could not fully translate. Deep below, something vast shifted, stretching awareness into a world it had not felt since stars were younger. At that exact moment, multiple vessels broke atmosphere. The mercenaries descended like carrion birds, their ships angular and armed, their intent purely transactional. They did not hail Elias. They did not care who he was beyond the bounty attached to his continued existence. To them this was another dead world, another problem to erase. Elias saw the ships through the ruins' fractured skyline and felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He was alone, unarmed and very far from home. Yet even as fear took hold, he felt something else beneath his boots, a deep, resonant presence that made the stone hum as if recognizing him. The ancient chamber behind him finished its awakening cycle. Somewhere beneath the ruins, eyes older than the Galactic Council opened, not in rage, not in hunger, but in recognition. The last mercy had been disturbed, and the Guardian had a choice to make. So did the galaxy, though it would take them a little longer to realize it. The mercenaries did not rush the ruins. They circled them with the patience of predators that had learned the cost of arrogance. their ships hovering just above the jagged skyline while scanners probed every corridor and hollow space. Elias watched from behind a fractured pillar as dropships detached and descended, their hulls whispering against ancient stone. The contrast was jarring. The ruins felt timeless, deliberate, while the invaders moved with sharp efficiency, every gesture rehearsed, every breath filtered through profit. Elias forced himself to think like an archaeologist, not a victim. The structures around him were not random. Passageways narrowed at precise intervals, walls angled to channel movement, floors scored with patterns too regular to be decorative. This place had been built to guide, to test, or to trap. He adjusted his suit's power output and moved deeper, trusting the architecture more than his odds. The first mercenary entered the outer hall with weapon raised, his armor layered in adaptive plating that shifted color as it analyzed the environment. He did not see Elias, but the floor beneath him dipped a fraction too late. Stone snapped upward with a dry, final sound. The mercenary vanished without a scream, sealed inside a slab that returned to stillness as if nothing had happened. Elias froze, heart hammering, equal parts horrified and awed. The ruins were not defending themselves indiscriminately. They were selective. The mercenary squad halted. Orders crackled across encrypted channels, sharp with irritation. They had expected a fragile human and brittle stone, not a labyrinth that responded like a living thing. Two more advanced, covering each other, their boots avoiding the marked patterns Elias had begun to recognize. They were learning, adapting the way professionals did. So did Elias. He slid into a side corridor barely wide enough for his shoulders, following a path that curved downward toward the heart of the complex. As he ran, he noticed doors opening a fraction ahead of him, seams glowing faintly before sealing again once he passed. The realization struck him with unsettling clarity. The ruins were not merely reacting to intrusion. They were reacting to him. A blast shook the structure. The mercenaries had switched tactics, collapsing sections of the outer halls to limit his escape routes. Dust and fragments rained down, ancient stone breaking for the first time in thousands of years. Elias stumbled, catching himself against a wall etched with symbols he had not yet translated. Among them, one phrase repeated in multiple dialects. Not master. Not weapon. Witness. Another mercenary died, this one dragged screaming into a fissure that should not have existed moments before. The survivors began to panic. Their leader barked orders to regroup, to fall back, to reevaluate the contract. But fear had crept into their movements, a subtle hesitation that the ruins exploited without mercy. Lightless shapes moved behind walls, vibrations pulsed through the floors, and something immense shifted far below, its presence now unmistakable. Elias reached a chamber unlike the others, wide and circular, its ceiling lost in shadow. At its center stood a plinth marked with the same symbols that had sealed the sleeping chamber above. He approached despite himself, drawn by a pressure in his chest that felt like expectation. As his hand hovered over the surface, fragments of understanding clicked into place. The civilization that built this place had not worshipped their guardian. They had partnered with it. The structures were filters, not fortresses, designed to separate destroyers from those who sought to understand. A mercenary burst into the chamber, weapon already firing. The shot never reached Elias. The air itself seemed to bend, the energy dissipating into nothing. The mercenary staggered, staring at his malfunctioning rifle, and in that moment of confusion, the floor opened beneath him. Silence followed. Elias backed away from the plinth, breathing hard. He was no hero. He was surviving by accident, by curiosity, by the strange mercy of ancient architects who had never imagined a human archaeologist running for his life across their world. Above him, more mercenaries closed in, their numbers dwindling, their confidence shattered. The chamber trembled again, stronger this time. A deep resonance rolled through the stone, not violent, but purposeful. Elias understood then that whatever slept below was no longer merely aware. It was deciding. He pressed himself against the wall as the ruins seemed to inhale, corridors shifting, pathways aligning toward a single point far beneath the surface. The mercenaries, cut off and disoriented, fired wildly at shadows that did not exist. One by one their signals went dark. Elias stood alone at the edge of the chamber, the vibrations steady now, almost calm. The hunt was ending, but the awakening had only begun, and he could feel, with a certainty that settled into his bones, that the thing rising from its ancient rest was not coming for him. The chamber shook as a shadow detached itself from the deepest darkness, massive and deliberate, moving with a precision that belied its size. Elias froze, his breath caught in his throat but not from fear. He had survived because the ruins had recognized him, guided him, protected him. Now he understood that what moved before him was no mere mechanism of stone or fossilized biology. It was alive. It had always been alive. The predator's form emerged fully, a fusion of sinew, scale, and something older, something designed to operate beyond conventional physics. Its eyes glowed faintly, amber and intelligent, scanning Elias with a calm curiosity. It did not advance in a predatory arc, nor did it display aggression. Instead, it positioned itself between him and the shattered entrances from which the mercenaries had emerged. The distinction was clear. The danger was not him. It was everything else. Elias's mind raced, forced to reconcile every story he had read of apex predators, of engineered guardians, with the one standing before him. The glyphs, the chamber, the selective mechanisms, all pointed to the same truth. This creature had been a sentinel for an entire civilization, its loyalty bound to understanding, to preservation, to mercy. And somehow, inexplicably, it recognized him as the inheritor of that trust. Above, the last surviving mercenaries regrouped, their sensors catching the shift in the environment. Weapons fired, plasma searing the air, but the predator moved faster than any biology or technology should allow. Each mercenary was neutralized with precision. None were torn violently apart. They were stopped, incapacitated, their systems disabled or crushed without excess. The message was clear. Resistance was futile, but destruction was optional. Elias stepped forward cautiously. The predator did not flinch, did not roar, but it exhaled a low, reverberating hum that echoed through the stone. Symbols etched into its skin pulsed faintly with energy, resonant with the glyphs Elias had translated. Every pulse seemed to answer a question he had not yet asked. Every movement reaffirmed the link that spanned millennia between human curiosity and ancient guardianship. He spoke, first as a reflex, then with clarity, his voice cutting through the trembling air. "I am not here to destroy. I am here to learn." The predator's eyes focused on him, unblinking, absorbing the weight of his words. And then it stepped aside, a silent acknowledgement of his intention, granting him access to the central chamber far below. The descent was deliberate. Corridors widened to accommodate the creature, ceilings shifting subtly to clear its path. The ruins themselves seemed to guide him, walls vibrating faintly as if offering encouragement. Elias began to understand that the mechanism above had been only a test, the initial phase of a trial designed not to awaken a monster, but to identify the right steward. At the base of the descent, the chamber opened into a cathedral-like expanse, vast enough to engulf the largest ships. Energy conduits crisscrossed the walls, ancient machines humming with dormant power. At the center, a pedestal rose from the floor, etched with symbols Elias had only begun to comprehend. Here, the civilization's true purpose revealed itself. A repository of knowledge and defense, keyed not to species or fleets, but to the integrity of those who approached it. The predator lowered its head, nudging the pedestal slightly. Elias realized that this was not simply a guardian, it was a key. Its presence, its judgment, unlocked access. Every fear he had carried vanished, replaced with awe and the sharp edge of responsibility. The mercenaries above might have been motivated by greed or contract, but he was motivated by something older, something deeply human, a desire to understand and protect. A sudden tremor shook the chamber, the precursor to an unmistakable signal. The mercenaries were attempting a retreat, but their ships had already been compromised by the resonance of the Guardian's awakening. From the observation windows above, faint lights indicated chaos, alarms blaring without audible voice. Elias understood that the predator was extending its influence, neutralizing threats with efficiency, ensuring no collateral destruction beyond what was necessary. He stepped closer to the pedestal, his fingers tracing the inscriptions, feeling the pulse of energy beneath the stone. The glyphs were instructions, warnings, and reassurances all at once. The civilization had created a force capable of immense destruction, but it was tethered to ethics, to judgment, to those who could appreciate the weight of its power. Elias felt that weight now not as a burden but as a call. From the shadows, the predator shifted its stance, a subtle gesture indicating the next phase. Elias understood without explanation. Whatever lay ahead required partnership, trust, and restraint. He had survived the mercenaries, but the true trial had just begun. The creature had awakened not to hunt, but to guide, and in that guidance humanity's potential glimmered with untested brilliance. Elias exhaled, steadying himself. This was no longer about survival. It was about stewardship, understanding, and a bond that spanned the forgotten eons. The predator's eyes met his, amber and unyielding, and in that gaze, he saw both the promise of protection and the weight of responsibility. The galaxy had sent hunters for him, but the ancient sentinel had chosen otherwise. And as the chamber's hum deepened, Elias realized the truth. The past had not awakened to punish him but to prepare him. Whatever the future held, the Guardian would not allow humanity to face it alone. The galaxy noticed the anomaly almost immediately. Sensors picked up irregular energy patterns on Keros 9 that no known natural phenomenon could explain. Starfleets diverted their courses, the Council's envoys activated emergency protocols, and High Command fleets began to classify the situation as a potential existential threat. All of it pointed to the same puzzle. A human had survived alone on a quarantined world, and something massive had awakened in his presence. Elias watched the approaching vessels from the observation deck of the central chamber, the Predator standing silently behind him, a living shield. The ships were massive, sleek, armed with weapons capable of tearing the planet apart if fired. Yet even from this distance, Elias understood that brute force would not succeed here. The ruins themselves were now extensions of the Guardian, every surface humming with energy, every conduit alive with purpose. He felt a calm certainty. The Predator had anticipated this, and together they were prepared. Council comms cut through the tension with sharp, clipped voices. Protocols demanded immediate elimination of the human and containment of the Predator. Warnings were issued, threats were made. Elias listened, voice low and steady, translating the rhetoric into a single, undeniable truth. The galaxy had underestimated both the ruins and humanity. The Predator was not a weapon of mindless destruction. It was a force bound to ethics, to judgment, and now to him. He made a decision. He broadcast a signal of his own, unsecured and untraceable by standard Council interference. Streams of imagery, translations, and records of the mercenary incursion poured across interstellar channels. He showed the ruins, the glyphs, the Guardian, and the evidence of selective action that spared him while neutralizing hostile forces. Humanity was not reckless. Humanity had been chosen, and the proof was undeniable. Above, the Council ships adjusted their formations. Commanders stared at data feeds that made no sense. Weapons primed for annihilation failed to respond properly, systems overridden by an intelligence they could not calculate. The Predator's influence reached upward, subtle yet absolute, and the fleets realized that conventional tactics would be ineffective. Panic flickered behind disciplined facades. Every strike planned against Elias and the Guardian would fail before it began. Elias moved through the chamber with careful steps, translating symbols as he went. He understood the Guardian's purpose more clearly now. It was a stabilizer, a sentinel designed to protect not territory but wisdom, culture, and integrity. Every pulse of energy, every shift in the stone architecture, was calibrated to ensure that those who approached with greed or malice were halted, and those who approached with curiosity or understanding were guided. He was standing inside the culmination of a civilization's foresight, a living lesson in restraint and judgment. The Predator moved alongside him as they reached the outer observation window, watching the Council fleets reposition in real time. Elias felt no fear for himself. His concern lay in the potential destruction the galaxy might attempt, the lives that might be lost in misunderstanding. Yet the Guardian's presence reassured him. Nothing would happen beyond what was necessary. Precision, not rage, governed this force. The Council strike leaders attempted to engage, launching drones and plasma arrays toward the surface. The Guardian acted instantly, intercepting, neutralizing, and redirecting attacks without a single life lost beyond the mercenaries already subdued. Elias realized then that the Predator's judgment extended beyond instinct. It understood strategy, threat assessment, and restraint. Humanity, small and fragile by comparison, had been entrusted with an ally beyond measure. Elias raised his communicator and addressed the Council directly. His voice was calm, deliberate, carrying not threats but clarity. This planet, this Guardian, these ruins, none of it is a weapon for conquest. The mercenaries sent after me acted out of fear and greed. Humanity did not provoke this force. We preserved it. We are capable of restraint. We are not your enemy. Silence followed. The Council waited, their ships suspended in orbit, their scanners unable to parse the scale of the Guardian's intent. Then, without fanfare, the fleets began to withdraw, re-evaluating their orders, their assumptions, and their understanding of humanity. Elias understood in that moment that the galaxy's perception of humans would never be the same. Fear had been replaced with a reluctant respect, an acknowledgement that small beings with courage and intellect could wield influence far beyond their size. The Guardian shifted, nudging Elias gently toward the central chamber. Its eyes glowed faintly, a reminder that the planet itself and the force it contained remained vigilant. Elias traced symbols along the walls, recording and decoding, fully aware that knowledge without action was meaningless. He had survived the Mercenaries, navigated the ruins and endured the awakening. Now it was time to ensure that humanity's role was clear, ethical and lasting. The tremor beneath the ruins subsided. Silence returned, but it was different now, charged with anticipation. The Predator's hum was steady, almost content, and Elias felt the same rhythm in his chest. The galaxy had come to threaten him, and he had survived not through brute force, but through understanding, partnership and respect for forces far older than any human could have imagined. Elias stepped back from the observation window, turning to face the Guardian. Together they were not just survivors, they were stewards. The galaxy would notice, would recalibrate, and eventually, it would understand that humanity had earned a place among forces once thought untouchable. The Council's fleets had retreated, but the challenge had not ended. Elias knew the true work was just beginning, to protect, to learn, and to demonstrate that even in a vast, uncaring universe, intelligence and restraint could command the respect of gods and monsters alike. And as the stars spun silently beyond Keros 9, Elias realized the most dangerous battles were not always fought with weapons. They were fought with understanding, courage, and the quiet certainty that some guardians could choose to awaken, and that humans, small, fragile, persistent, could rise to meet them. Elias Cade stood at the heart of the ruins, the central chamber now quiet, yet alive with residual energy that thrummed beneath his boots. The Predator crouched nearby, massive and calm, its amber eyes following him with the patient intelligence of a being that had watched centuries unfold in silence. Elias could feel the weight of what had happened, the lives that had been at stake, and the precarious position humanity now held in the galaxy. He had survived the Mercenaries, survived the Council's scrutiny, and earned a bond with a force older than most civilizations, yet the responsibility that came with that bond pressed on him more heavily than any weapon could. The ruins themselves seemed to exhale, corridors subtly shifting to accommodate him, passages opening as if to welcome a steward rather than a visitor. He traced his fingers over glyphs he had now fully translated, understanding not just their literal meaning, but the philosophy that underpinned the civilization that created this guardian. It was not brute power they had trusted to protect their legacy, but judgment, intelligence, and empathy. Humans, small and fragile, had been tested and found capable of more than most species could imagine. Above, the galaxy had taken notice. Word of the events on Keros 9 spread faster than any council decree, reaching far corners of space where humans had long been dismissed as insignificant. Fleet commanders whispered, analysts recalculated, and political leaders reassessed alliances. Elias knew that fear of humanity had been replaced by something more potent: respect. Not blind reverence, but wary acknowledgement that even the smallest species could command the attention of forces meant to be untouchable. The Predator nudged Elias gently toward the central plinth, the pulse of its energy in sync with the ruins themselves. Here lay the culmination of millennia, the knowledge of a civilization, the means to defend it, and the silent promise that no threat would go unjudged. Elias realized as he stood before the pedestal, that the galaxy had come to test him, and in response, he had awakened not a weapon but a partner. Together they were a balance of understanding and power, ethics and force. He activated the plinth carefully, channeling the Guardian's energy through the chamber in a controlled arc. Holographic displays shimmered to life, revealing maps, schematics, and star charts that chronicled not only the extinct civilization's history, but warnings, philosophies, and lessons for those who came after. Elias traced the lines with reverent fingers, feeling the pulse of intelligence embedded in every design. It was clear that the Guardian had not been a tool of war, but a test of character, a measure of whether a species could wield knowledge without succumbing to greed. The Council's fleets, still orbiting in distant positions, observed the sudden surge of energy, their weapons rendered useless by forces they could not comprehend. Commanders communicated in clipped tones, frustration edging their voices, but the presence of the Predator was absolute. No threat could advance without first meeting judgment, and no assault could succeed against a force that acted with perfect discernment. Elias felt a thrill of clarity. He was not simply a survivor, but a fulcrum upon which the future of humanity might pivot. Suddenly, a tremor shook the chamber, sharper and more urgent than anything before. The Guardian's eyes flared, and its body shifted, signaling both attention and readiness. Elias's pulse quickened. The tremor originated from outside the ruins. A fleet of mercenaries had tried one final strike, desperate, reckless, but their path was already anticipated. The Predator moved with fluid precision, its massive limbs deflecting energy beams, disabling weapons and neutralizing drones without unnecessary violence. Every action was calculated, controlled, and flawless, demonstrating intelligence that rivaled any known strategic mind. Elias felt a surge of gratitude toward the creature, tempered by the weight of responsibility. He had been spared, yes, but not for comfort or chance. He had been chosen because he could carry the burden of knowledge, the judgment required to steward power responsibly. The Predator's gaze met his once more, conveying something that no words could capture: trust, acknowledgement, and the silent assurance that together they would face whatever came next. In the aftermath, the mercenary fleet retreated, their pride shattered and their mission failed. The galaxy would learn, slowly, that humans were no longer to be underestimated, that intelligence and perseverance could awaken forces that even the oldest civilizations had relied upon. Elias stepped back from the plinth, his mind racing not with fear, but with plans, with possibilities, with the certainty that humanity's place in the cosmos had irrevocably changed. He turned to the Predator, standing tall and vigilant, a living monument to a past long gone yet still present. "We have work to do," he said quietly, voice steady, eyes bright with resolve. The creature inclined its head, a gesture of acknowledgement, and together they began the process of securing the ruins, cataloging knowledge, and ensuring that the lessons of the past would endure. Outside, the stars of Keros 9 sparkled indifferently, unaware of the pivotal moment unfolding on its surface. Yet the galaxy felt the shift, sensing that a new balance had been struck. Humanity, small and fragile, had survived where others had failed, guided by curiosity, courage, and the unlikely alliance of a human and an ancient guardian. Elias paused at the chamber's threshold, looking back one final time. The ruins seemed almost to breathe around him, a living archive now in capable hands. He understood that the Predator's awakening was not the climax, but the beginning. Together they would face threats not yet imagined, defend knowledge that could not be measured, and demonstrate that humanity could rise to the challenge of the cosmos. The hum of the Guardian resonated through the stone and through him, a steady reminder that vigilance and wisdom were inseparable. Elias clenched his fists, feeling both the enormity of what had transpired and the thrill of potential. The galaxy had underestimated humans for too long, and the awakening on Keros 9 had proven a lesson that could not be ignored. As the chamber fell into silence, Elias whispered to himself, a quiet vow to the past and the present: "We will not fail." Behind him, the Predator shifted, a living sentinel, and in that moment the human and the ancient force became inseparable, ready to face whatever the universe dared to throw their way. The stars outside seemed brighter now, reflecting the triumph of intellect, courage, and an alliance that transcended time. Humanity had survived the impossible, earned the respect of forces older than any known species, and discovered that guardians sometimes choose their protectors, not because they are strongest but because they are worthy. And in that truth the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again.